Fingers crossed, all eyes will be on the Bank of England's announcement tomorrow after today's sensational, unexpected, bigger than expected drop of inflation. The rate is now at its lowest level for more than 2 years.
I've never seen you more excited, Tom. Are Britain's diversity and inclusion programmes backfiring? The Business Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, certainly thinks so. She says inclusion policies come at the expense of white men. God forbid.
But there's a big question here, and it's the circumstances surrounding the resignation of Leo Varadkar. Few saw it coming, but it was only a couple of weeks ago that he went to Ireland with 2 referendums on the same day to change wording in the constitution around what a family is, whether that's based on the institution of marriage or not, but also the role of women, not only within the home. All of the opinion polls said that Leo Varadkar, and actually all of the major parties in Ireland that were supporting this change, they all said that he was going to win it. They said by 20 points, by 30 points. There was a couple of polls even with a 40-point lead. And then when it came to the day of the vote, these 2 referendums that everyone expected would pass lost by 74% no and 68% no.
Huge loss.
Huge losses.
Loss. I think it shows the Irish people aren't actually that interested in woke virtue signalling when it comes to constitutional changes. And actually, women aren't so easily offended as people like Leo Varadkar might seem to think. But it's very interesting what you were saying earlier. We were chatting in the break about how the governments across the world seem to get it so wrong when it comes to referendums. They completely misjudge the public mood. Brexit, not least. Brexit, not least. The government, of course, thought they would easily win that. But also in October 2023, do you remember the Australian referendum on setting up a parliament, not quite a parliament, but a voice, they called it, for the Aboriginal community? All the opinion polls said they were going to win by huge margins. The day of the vote, they lost. It happens time and time again. Well, do you know what I think? Should we have more referendums? I think that's a question. I would like to see more referendums.
Politicians would hate it.
I'd like to see them. I think the government and politicians get it wrong far too much. Ask the people. What do you think? gbviews@gbnews.com. More referendums, yay or nay? But first, your headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 3 minutes past 1. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story. Keir Starmer says the Prime Minister has the sword of Damocles hanging over him. Speaking during PMQs, the Labour leader criticised Rishi Sunak over the cost of his Rwanda plan and the lack of flights to the East African nation. But Rishi Sunak has insisted flights will get off the ground and that the opposition doesn't have a plan to fix the issue. MPs overturned 10 amendments to the legislation made by peers when the bill was in the Commons on Monday.
Tragedy is, we know the Prime Minister doesn't even believe in the Rwanda gimmick. He tried to stop funding it, but he's now so diminished that his entire focus is stopping his MPs holding the sword of Damocles above his head. How has he managed to spend £600 million of taxpayer money on a gimmick to deport 300 people?
But the Prime Minister said Labour is running out of ideas.
Not only does the Labour Party not have a plan to fix this issue, but the truth is they don't actually care about fixing this issue. When he talks about the gangs, when we gave the police new powers to crack down on the people smuggling gangs, he spent months campaigning and voting against it. If it was up to him, those criminals would still be out on our streets, Mr. Speaker. And the truth is, if he wasn't the Labour leader, he'd still want to be their lawyer.
Housing asylum seekers on barges, military bases and student digs will cost taxpayers more than the hotels currently being used. The National Audit Office said housing those waiting for asylum decisions in alternative accommodation, such as a BB Stockholm barge and former RAF sites, would cost the Home Office £1.2 billion. That's £46 million more than using hotels and B&Bs. In other news, Leo Varadkar has announced he's stepping down as Ireland's Prime Minister. The 45-year-old says he has resigned as the leader of the party immediately and will stay on as Taoiseach until his successor is chosen. Mr Varadkar became the first openly gay man to lead the Irish government when he came out during the 2015 marriage equality referendum. He described his time in the role as fulfilling and says it was the right time.
I know this will come as a surprise to many people and a disappointment to some, and I hope at least you will understand my decision. I know that others will, how shall I put it, cope with the news just fine. That is the great thing about living in a democracy. There's never a right time to resign high office. However, this is as good a time as any.
And UK inflation has fallen more than expected to the lowest level in over 2 years. Official figures show UK inflation for February came in at 3.4%. That's down from 4%. It's a bigger fall than economists had forecast. Inflation is now closer to the Bank of England's 2% target and comes ahead of the latest interest rate decision on Thursday. Now, a fresh wave of rail and London Underground strikes is set to bring travel chaos next month. ASLEF, the train drivers' union, has called a series of walkouts from April the 5th until the 8th, coupled with a 6th-day overtime ban involving 16 rail companies. They've also called tube strikes on the 8th of April and the 4th of May in the capital. ASLEF drivers have voted by 98% in favour of industrial action. Time is running out for Rishi Sunak. That's a message from Ed Davey as he launches the Liberal Democrats' local election campaign. The Lib Dem leader kicked off his party's English local election campaign in Blue Wall, Hertfordshire, where the Lib Dems made major gains last year. Ed Davey revealed his message to the Prime Minister as he unveiled a blue and gold hourglass in front of Liberal Democrat activists.
Is running out for Rishi Sunak. He might have bottled the May election. He might be hoping the tide will turn as he squats in Downing Street for a few months more. But even the Prime Minister can't deny voters across England the chance to cast their vote in the local elections on May the 2nd.
And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Right, well, we have some breaking news for you now. The world-renowned hospital where King Charles and Princess Catherine were recently treated is dealing with a suspected security breach. At least one member of staff is suspected of trying to access the Princess of Wales' notes. But in the last few minutes, the chief executive of the London clinic, where the Princess of Wales was treated earlier this year, has said...
This is the quote. All appropriate investigatory, regulatory and disciplinary steps will be taken when looking at these alleged data breaches. So, just to repeat, the London clinic has acknowledged alleged data breaches and said all appropriate investigatory, regulatory and disciplinary steps will be taken.
Very interesting indeed.
Let's cross live now to the London clinic because our royal reporter, our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, joins us now from the scene. Cameron, a statement.
Yeah, clearly this is a huge headache for the London clinic, Tom. It's a hospital in central London which is well used and trusted to treat royalty, politicians and celebrities as well. They say on their website that they pride themselves on providing excellence in one place. And as we know, the Princess of Wales was admitted here in January for what Kensington Palace described as planned abdominal surgery. And last night it all kicked off a bit because the Mirror reported that at least one member of staff allegedly attempted to access the Princess of Wales's private medical notes. The paper also reported that bosses contacted Kensington Palace immediately after they discovered the alleged breach and were investigating. Now, Kensington Palace told me last night that it is very much a matter for the hospital. The statement from the hospital to the Mirror last night said, "We firmly believe that all our patients, no matter their status, deserve total privacy and confidentiality." And of course, as you just said, Tom, in the last couple of minutes, the chief executive of the London clinic has said all appropriate investigatory, regulatory and disciplinary steps will be taken when looking at this alleged data breach. Now, the Information Commissioner Office also released a statement to us this morning. They said, "We can confirm that we have received a breach report and are assessing the information provided." Now, this is clearly very serious because this is potentially a criminal offence to access someone's private medical details without their permission or indeed the hospital's permission, i.e. unless you're directly involved in the treatment of that patient, it could be a criminal offence. Health Minister Maria Caulfield caused a little bit of confusion this morning by suggesting that the police had been asked to look into this. A Metropolitan Police spokesperson said that they're not aware of any referral to them this morning. But of course, this is in the context of all these conspiracies surrounding the Princess of Wales when it comes to her health. It's also the hospital, because it could have wider implications, because this is also the hospital where King Charles underwent a procedure on his enlarged prostate. And we know King Charles is still receiving outpatient cancer treatment at an undisclosed private London hospital. So clearly huge implications. But that statement, just to repeat, in the last few minutes from the chief executive of the hospital, that all appropriate investigatory, regulatory and disciplinary steps will be taken.
Thank you so much, Cameron Walker. It'll be incredibly important for the London Clinic to get to the bottom of this, to get to the bottom of what exactly has happened, considering just how many high-profile patients they have, not least the royal family, of course.
Certainly, and is this one rogue member of staff, or is this a deeper problem?
But no denial.
No denial. But some more breaking news now. In the past hour, the Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, has resigned.
Yes, Varadkar's resignation as leader of his party is effective from today, and he will step down as Prime Minister, or as the Irish say, Taoiseach, when a successor is selected.
Well, this is what he had to say a little earlier.
I know this will come as a surprise to many people and a disappointment to some, and I hope at least you will understand my decision. I know that others will, how shall I put it, cope with the news just fine. That is the great thing about living in a democracy. There's never a right time to resign high office. However, this is as good a time as any. Budget 2024 is done. Negotiations have not yet commenced on the next one. The institutions of the Good Friday Agreement are working again, and our trading relationship with the UK in the post-Brexit era is settled and stable. My reasons for stepping down are both personal and political, but after careful consideration and some soul-searching, I believe that a new Taoiseach and a new leader will be better placed than me to achieve that, to renew and strengthen the team, to focus our message and policies, to drive implementation. And after 7 years in office, I don't feel I'm the best person for that job anymore.
7 years in office. Of course, he took the role on in 2017 in the midst of the Brexit wars. He was a constant presence on many of our screens for much of those negotiations. But let's get a bit more on the context behind this shock resignation. Joining us now is the author and commentator on Irish politics, Kevin Marr. Kevin, thank you for making the time for us this afternoon. Many people will have been surprised by this announcement. But many people will have also looked to the referendum results just a few weeks ago, where the government was unexpectedly, sensationally defeated. Do you think that's playing a role here?
I don't think it is. I think the two things are probably discreetly separate. I mean, I think you know, Leo Varadkar is still only 45. Incredibly, he was first made Taoiseach at 38. So he's been around for quite a long time. He's a very ambitious man, I think it's fair to say, and he sort of alluded to that a little bit in his statement that some people will be probably glad to see the back of him. He's often a controversial figure in Irish politics. Can be a bit brittle sometimes, can be a bit abrasive, can rub some people up the wrong way, but he's been very effective. He's a very wily character, and he's managed to survive at the top of Irish politics for quite a long time. He was first made a cabinet minister back in 2011, so he's been around a long time. So I think there's been a kind of an idea that he would move on to perhaps something else at some stage, and there's as he pointed out, there's never an ideal time to quit these roles. But I think this has kind of been priced in for some time, that this day was coming.
So you take what he says at face value, but he did say personal and political reasons. Surely the failure to win that referendum, well, the two referenda, And perhaps also all the controversy over illegal and legal migration that has very much kicked off in Ireland in recent months. There's quite a lot that's been going wrong, lots of complaints too about the economy in Ireland, joblessness, also the healthcare system too. It's quite a lot of controversial issues at the moment for the Taoiseach. So surely this is political. There must be more to this than, I don't know, he's got a bit tired of the job.
I think there is. I think that there often comes a time when you've been in high office for quite a while that actually you see the same problems coming around again and again, and it gets a little bit boring. Perhaps the stage gets a bit small when you've been the head of government for quite some time. He was very, very keen to point out that he's not got another gig lined up at the moment, but I don't think anybody believes him on that one. I suspect he's got his eye either on something at the United Nations or something potentially at the European Commission. Of course, there's a new European Commission later this year, and the current Irish European Commissioner is Mairead McGuinness, is a Fine Gael politician as well. So there may be an opportunity for him there. I think he's looking to move on to do something else, but he leaves behind a situation where his party, Fine Gael, and the other great party of Irish politics, Fianna Fáil, are in coalition together since 2020, and that's kind of a kind of loveless, clammy embrace between two parties that have spent 100 years absolutely loathing each other. And the reason, of course, they're in government together is to keep Sinn Féin out of government. Sinn Féin won the 2020 general election in terms of the popular vote. We've got a general election coming up in Irish politics sometime over the next year, a bit like the British system, you can call it. It's in the hands of the Taoiseach to call that date. But within the next 12 months, there will be an Irish general election. Leo Varadkar's party, Fine Gael, not in great shape, it's fair to say, taking a lot of the brunt for decisions that have been made over a long period. As I say, he's been in power in office himself and his party, for a decade or more. So there's very little room to move out of the way of kind of public criticism on the issues that you talked about a few moments ago. So I think he's probably assessed. I'm coming to the end of my time as Taoiseach. I'll go on my terms rather than the electorate's, and I'll see what else is out there and see if I can jump into a bigger international job.
No, very fascinating you raised that prospect of a new Irish commissioner. So often in the European Union, it's when someone fails in their current job, they can just, move on and get something bigger and something better. We're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much for your time and your expertise.
What do they call it? A retirement home for failed politicians?
Yes, normally that's the House of Lords, but perhaps it's grander in the European Commission. But no, it is interesting how he's just got back. On Monday, he got back from visiting the United States, going to the White House, having his big handshake moment with Joe Biden on St. Patrick's Day. A good send-off, perhaps.
Moving off to grander things, perhaps. Well, in other news, 8 small boats have been intercepted in the Channel in the latest surge of crossings.
The UK and French authorities are responding to the latest rise in an improvement in weather conditions has seen criminal people smugglers attempt to launch multiple small boats from French beaches.
Well, joining us now is GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. Mark, are we witnessing a surge in crossings then?
Yeah, we are. We're moving towards what could be a record day for the year so far. The previous record was set on the 4th of this month when 401 migrants came across in a number of small boats on that particular day because weather conditions had improved. This time of the year, it's always pretty rough out there in the Channel, but you get those days like today when it's just a bit calmer. And when that happens, you get a surge because the days like today are few and far between. So at the moment, it looks like we've had 8 small boats that have come across. The last of those boats is the Dover lifeboat taking about 65 migrants into Dover Harbour. They've just come off the vessel within the last few minutes, and that takes the total for today to over 390. So you can see we're pushing up towards that record day already, and actually this is pushing up now towards 4,000 people who've come across the English Channel so far this year. And we're very early on in the year, and that would be more than where we were at this point last year when the government, of course, said that it was doing so much to reduce numbers, with a 36% reduction in the overall total arriving across the Channel last year compared to the year before.
Well, really concerning for the government then if it's starting to become more than last year, because last year was such a decline. But Mark, obviously more people coming into the country raises the question of asylum seeker hotels. They've been such a bone of contentiousness within this country. What will likely happen here?
Well, a couple of things to report on that. You remember, of course, that Rishi Sunak vowed last August to end the use of hotels for asylum seekers because, of course, it takes these hotels out of use for the local communities. You can't have your wedding there, other important functions. And sometimes these hotels are taken out of use for a year, 2, even 3 years at a time. Well, what the government have just announced is that by next Friday, they will have handed back 100 of the hotels that have been requisitioned for use for asylum seekers. They've put them into other accommodations such as these disused RAF bases. Scampton is not yet online, but RAF Wethersfield in Essex is, and of course the Baby Stockholm barge, along with a former student accommodation in Huddersfield. But on that issue as well, we've had the spending watchdog, the National Audit Office, coming out with a report today saying that the cost of actually these big purpose-built or redeveloped centres to put all the migrants in is costing more than keeping them in the hotels. Now, what the government says in response to that is the way that the National Audit Office have calculated this doesn't tell the whole story. They are including the cost of redeveloping these disused sites into habitable sites again. So that is got an upfront cost, but then in the longer term it will be much cheaper, they say, to house people en masse in big centres like RAF Scampton, Wethersfield, the Baby Stockholm, than having them in hotels at a cost of £8.2 million a day.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Mark White, GB News Home and Security Editor. Doesn't seem like there are any good options.
No, but it is nice that 100 hotels have returned to civilian use.
Now, lots of you have lots of different views on whether we should be having more referenda in this country. We're going to get to some. We're going to get to some. Hold your horses. Still to come, UK inflation has fallen more than expected. Will we see a cut in interest rates? And yes, we will get to those views on referenda. This is Good Afternoon Britain.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Get this right, we all know by now, don't we, that so many NHS workers are abused by people that they're trying to help. We'll all agree that that is pretty damn disgraceful, but what do we do about it? Because now some London hospitals are looking at whether or not they should be able to ban people that do this for a year from those hospital facilities. Is that the way forward? Daniel, do you like this? No abuse, no excuse, that is the campaign?
There's no other choice for most people. It's either the NHS or nothing. And if you're going to take that monopolistic power, then you need, I think, you have responsibilities towards people. You can't cut them off. So there are ways in which, of course, you can bring criminal charges against them. If they committed a criminal offence, that's fine. They might even be locked up in jail. But what you can't do is cut off health services because you're the only supplier.
Well, yes, I think you can cut it off and you should cut it off. London is very different from everywhere else, and it goes back to a conversation about immigration. The majority of nurses in London are either African or Filipino, and it harks back to their nature and their culture. When you're younger, your parents look after you. When you're older, you look after them. They don't go into homes. So there's a way that a threshold of tolerance they have that is above and beyond most people. So, because I found like when I was younger, most of the nurses were white. Now they work in hospitals in Ascot and Somerset. London is the war zone. I have seen horrific things happen to nurses, and they stay. They show up for work. There's a protection they are owed, beyond owed. And if you abuse something that's offered to you as a part of your citizenship, there should be a penalty for that. For the same reason,
you're obliged to use it. There's no offer involved in the NHS.
But there is an offer because at the end of the day, like you earn it, you figure out how to get money and go private. So just because you've created something that gives you no, it's easy. If it's
that's
easy,
an impossible solution.
They've created something that's kind and easy and beneficial to all, indeed. But it's a good thing for all. Do not abuse it. That simple.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels we're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 25 minutes past 1, and there's some good news for the economy. Yes, inflation has fallen down to 3.4%. That's down from 4% in January, more than expected. But are Brits actually feeling any richer?
Well, good news for you. GB News has been out and about in Birmingham, seeing how this fall in inflation impacts all of us.
I don't know if I'm like everyone else. I've never earned so much money. But actually I've never spent so much money either, kind of thing. So all these, gains in a little bit of interest rate means nothing to me. Everything's a lot more expensive than what it was.
I think people are finding it really difficult in this country at the moment. I think people are struggling. People feel objectively poorer. And yeah, obviously it's great that it's come down a fraction of a percent, but what that practically means for the average man and woman is not a lot at the moment, I think.
They mean absolutely nothing. You know, as a layperson in the street, I'm buying my beans, I'm buying my whatever, and the prices just keep going that way, so I think it's a bit of a red herring.
So we have to choose very carefully what we eat and what we buy and try and do it in the most economical way now, whereas before we could just really sort of please ourselves.
A lot of food that we're cutting back on, a lot of stuff like, especially branded food, we're going to get the cheaper type one.
I think that really takes it home, doesn't it? Lots of people have never earned more money, but never spent so much money as well.
Yeah,
it's that
so they're not
relative.
feeling it.
Yeah, but you might not be feeling the impact on inflation coming down, but the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, remains positive, saying inflation is forecast to hit that bank's 2% target within just a few months.
And here to break down those figures a little bit further is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. Liam, inflation down, interest rates down soon?
Good to be with you guys. Plenty of wisdom from Brummies there in those clips. I think a lot of us feel like that, don't we? Our wages have gone up in money terms, but our spending power seems to have diminished. And that's what inflation does, of course. Just before we come to interest rates, because, of course, we've got that decision from the Bank of England tomorrow, the 9 members of the Monetary Policy Committee, our interest rate's going to come down from 5.25%, where they've been since last August. Well, these numbers will really impact the Bank of England's thinking. Inflation did come down during the year to February to 3.4%, so prices during that year rose on average by 3.4%. During the year to January, they were down by 4%, so that's a pretty big reduction. And we're way back down from 11% inflation, which we had at the end of 2022. That was a 40-year high. Why is inflation coming down? So why are prices still going up, but by going up by less in the round? That's because some prices are easing. So food price inflation was up at 19% this time last year. It's now down at 4.5%. So the price rises in supermarkets have really slowed down. And some prices have actually come down in absolute terms over the year. Say petrol and diesel. Petrol in February was roughly 4% cheaper than in February 2023, and diesel was 11% cheaper than in February 2023 last month, though in the last couple of weeks, prices have started to go back up again, as motorists will have noticed. So it's a mixed picture. Inflation is lower, but it's still a lot higher than the Bank of England's 2% target.
And Liam, what is this going to do to the decisions that are going to be made tomorrow at the Bank of England? Will it affect their overall calculation? And frankly, has it affected market expectations at all either?
It's absolutely affected market expectations. Let's do that one first. So mortgage rates have come down even since 7 a.m. this morning. You've got some of the big lenders saying either their rates are coming down straight away or they will lower their standard variable rates. You'll get better fixed rate deals because now the markets feel that that Bank of England interest rate cut, when it comes, and it will probably be followed by 1 or 2 more cuts, that will come sooner. But I don't think it's going to come tomorrow, Tom and Emily. Now, a lot of GB News viewers and listeners who live on their savings, who lived on fixed income, who don't like the fact interest rates have been low for many, many years over the last couple of decades. They like the fact that interest rates are now 5.25%. They even want them to go higher. So, of course, lots of younger people, people with mortgages and people who are struggling with personal debt, they want interest rates to fall. And certainly when interest rates come down, it tends to give the overall economy a boost because it's more investment, more GDP growth. But I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow. The reason I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow is because inflation is still, 2% compared to 3.4%. It's still way above target. There are some members of the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee, the 9 economists, who just as recently as last month were voting for interest rates to go up even more. Why is that? Because there's still quite a lot of pressures in the system. Wages are still going up more sharply than the Bank of England would like because they think that's adding to firms' costs, adding to inflation because the firms pass those costs on. And there's also 1 or 2 kind of what we call, or what I call, geopolitical whiz-bangs knocking about in the MPC's thinking. What's going to happen to the price of oil? What's going to happen to the price of gas? Of course, their interest rate decisions don't impact the war in Russia and Ukraine or relations between Israel and Hamas and the broader Middle East and all these things that impact the oil price. But if the oil price starts ticking up, adding to firms' costs, petrol and diesel going up again, prices going up across the economy, because, of course, energy affects everything, it's hard for the Bank of England to be seen to be cutting rates because it looks as if they don't care about getting inflation down. And I would point out, don't shoot the messenger, in the last couple of weeks, the price of oil has actually gone up by around 11% to almost $90 a barrel at one point earlier this week. So there are some blots on the landscape. The overwhelming assumption is that interest rates will start to come down quite soon, possibly April, May or June. But
not
the Tories
tomorrow.
are certainly hoping they can get some interest rate cuts in, a number of them before the next election. But, this is economics. Nobody really knows. It's all guesswork, some of it a bit more educated.
We'll have to wait and see, won't we? Well, thank you very much indeed, Liam Halligan, our business and economics editor there. Also worth noting that a lot of people will be, quite happy. Lots of journalists as well want to see interest rates go down. They've got big mortgages, but some people watching will be quite happy with where they are.
Yeah, well, still to come, 1 in 5 Muslim prisoners are now white, according to new data. That's not because they've changed colour, it's because new people are converting within prisons. Now, is this signs of... there are some concerns that there are signs of radicalisation in prisons. We'll get much more on that after your news headlines.
It's 1:33. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Keir Starmer says the Prime Minister has a sword of Damocles hanging over him. Speaking during PMQs, the Labour leader criticised Rishi Sunak over the cost of his Rwanda plan and the lack of flights to the East African nation. But Rishi Sunak has insisted flights will get off the ground and that the opposition doesn't have a plan to fix the issue. MPs overturned 10 amendments to the legislation made by peers when the bill was in the Commons on Monday.
The tragedy is we know the Prime Minister doesn't even believe in the Rwanda gimmick. He tried to stop funding it, but he's now so diminished that his entire focus is stopping his MPs holding the sword of Damocles above his head. How has he managed to spend £600 million of taxpayer money on a gimmick to deport 300 people?
Leo Varadkar has announced he's stepping down as Ireland's Prime Minister. The 45-year-old says he has resigned as a leader of the party immediately and will stay on as Taoiseach until his successor is chosen. Mr Varadkar became the first openly gay man to lead the Irish government when he came out during the 2015 marriage equality referendum. A fresh wave of rail and London Underground strikes is set to bring travel chaos next month. ASLEF, the train drivers' union, has called a series of walkouts from April the 5th till the 8th, coupled with a 6th-day overtime ban involving 16 rail companies. They've also called tube strikes on the 8th of April and the 4th of May in the capital. ASLEF drivers have voted 98% in favour of industrial action. And bosses at the London clinic where the Princess of Wales had abdominal surgery have said all appropriate investigatory, regulatory and disciplinary steps will be taken when looking at medical data breaches. The Mirror has reported that at least one member of staff tried to access Princess Catherine's notes while she was a patient at the private hospital in central London in January. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2693 and €1.1703 euros. The price of gold is £1,697 and 66 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,732 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. As we head through this evening, the rain we've seen across England and Wales today will start to ease, but further wet and windy weather returns to the northwest. And that's because we're looking out towards the west for this next weather system that's going to spread its way in. This feature, though, starts to ease away, so the rain and low cloud will start to just push its way southeastwards. But for most of us, it does leave quite a lot of cloud overnight tonight. A few pockets of clearer skies, but where we see those, we'll see some mist and fog patches developing. But you can see to the northwest the return of that wet and windy weather spilling in. But what it does mean is that for most places, temperatures won't be falling away too low, typically between 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. A wet and windy start to the day, though, for western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy bursts of rain filtering their way west to east through the morning. It will start to fringe in across northern England, perhaps North Wales as well. But for most of England and Wales, a dry and bright Thursday afternoon with some spells of sunshine, but a stronger breeze for all of us. So temperatures still getting to 14 to 16 degrees in the sunnier skies, but feeling just that little bit fresher. Fast forward to Friday morning and that weather front starts to filter its way southwards, so a grey and murky start to the day here, but brighter skies following on behind with a mixture of sunshine and showers, but it is turning cooler. Our temperatures sliding away in towards the weekend, some stronger winds at times too, and some heavy downpours. Bye for now.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, well, at the top of the show, we asked whether we should have more referenda. And this was in the context of Leo Varadkar's resignation following 2 referenda defeats.
I like how
Referendum defeats.
You keep using the word referenda.
Why is that, Tom?
Is it because a viewer by the name of Tom, hi Tom, has written in to say the plural is referenda, not referendums.
Do you know what? I think a chap called Andy also wrote in. I think lots of you wrote in to correct me on that. I do know that, but I also think, colloquially, you are allowed to say referendums too.
I think both are fine. I remember these linguistic battles in 2016, 17, 18, 19, and different folks for different strokes. Yeah,
anyway,
one might be more technically correct than the other, but OK, John has written in to say there should be a referendum on leaving the ECHR and what sort of immigration we want in the country.
Andrew says we need a referendum on whether we need more referenda. And then he goes on to say he's pedantic with the referenda. No, we like to be accurate on this show. Andy says the country only needs one referendum, a general election to decide which party is the least worse to take us through the next 5 years.
Well, William in Birmingham has said the most important referendum this country could hold is to scrap the House of Lords. Yes or no, and nothing in between, no fudging the question.
And Jonathan, he says, I live in Brisbane, originally from Swindon. Nice and sunny over there, I imagine. He says, a referendum in Australia generally only succeeds if it has bipartisan support. The voice to Parliament didn't. Initial polls showed it succeeding, yes, but the government pushed it and refused to explain how it would work. The polls then became less favourable to the point it looked doomed to fail. It then failed. It was an extremely divisive campaign. More referendums would be dangerous. I think that's a good point. I mean, Brexit, whether you supported having the referendum or not, it was hugely divisive. And lots of people say we became a more angry nation as a result.
And there were lots of Brexiteers who said it would have been perhaps better if we had just elected a parliament that believed in leaving the European Union. They passed a law without a referendum, then you wouldn't have had the battle between the people and the parliament when most MPs didn't want to leave. And we had that sort of constant constitutional wrangling for years and years and years.
And the lawyers. Yeah. And Guy says I should watch Peter Cook's classical satirical film, The Rise and Rise of Michael Rimmer, in which he plays a Tony Blair-type Prime Minister who governs solely by referendum in order to stay popular. That sounds fun. Maybe I'll watch that.
Well, let's move on to our next story, because 1 in 5 Muslim prisoners are white. That's according to the new data out by the Ministry of Justice.
Now, it's sparked some concerns that inmates are being encouraged to convert by who controls power in the prisons. So the number of white Muslims in prison is 3 times the rate in the general Muslim population in England and Wales. And while evidence suggests that people may be encouraged to convert, prison experts are insisting that authentic conversions should not be ruled out. So there are concerns that potentially there are Islamist gangs that are forcing people to convert, to create hostile environments and to have a sort of gang culture that's led by religion.
Although, what's the truth of it? Some people have been suggesting that there are more conversions just because you get different food options, and perhaps a bit of variety in prison is nice. But let's talk about the issue of conversion and whether it's an issue at all. Joining us is the founder of the Oxford Institute for British Islam, Dr. Taj Haji. And Dr. Taj, thank you so much for joining us. Are you surprised by the relatively high conversion rate figures that we've seen from the Ministry of Justice today?
Yeah, but before commenting on that, I think we really need to highlight what you've already mentioned, that Muslims are only 60% of the population in this country, and yet they comprise 18% of the prison inmates. So this is truly scandalous. I mean, it's really, there's something seriously wrong in the Muslim community where the leadership, the cultural, the theological leadership is not addressing this fact that why are Muslims 3 times more likely to be in jail. So that's the issue that we really need to come to grips with. Secondly, the issue of conversion. You know, I mean, for example, how much of this conversion is actually genuine and or expedient? That's the issue. If it's a genuine conversion, you can't prevent people to accept a new religion because there's freedom of faith in this country. But if it's coercive, because, for example, you mentioned because it's a better deal, they're getting halal food or some better treatment, or they're avoiding gang fights in jail, then clearly this is something we should address, because the type of Islam that usually is found in prisons are the fundamentalist, the fanatical, and the fruitcake variety. And when we have these 3 Fs, fundamentalist, fanatical, and fruitcake variety being imposed onto naive white Muslims or white people who become Muslim, they actually pose an incredible danger to society upon their release, because this is the type of Islam they'll be bringing to the community that they will be welcomed back in. So this is something really frightening and dangerous, and we should be alarmed about it.
Could it be that you have prisoners, Muslim inmates, who are using religion as a way to exert some control in the ways that there are usually gangs within jails, or so I hear, and this is just one way to exert control over other inmates and to have some kind of power within the jail?
Absolutely. There are gangs in every jail throughout the world. So, I mean, this is clearly something, it's just a fact of life. But the issue here is that if they're converting, what kind are they converting to? A peaceful, meaningful, tolerant Islam? Or are they coming into this Islamic radicalism, extremism, and so forth? My understanding is that that type of Islam, the extremist, radical, militant brand, is prevalent and predominant in jails. And if that's the case, then these whites who are becoming Muslim are being infected and by this contagion, and they will come out with this type of warped ideology and programming that will pose a great danger to the public.
No, it's really interesting. You mentioned the 3 Fs there, the fundamentalists, the fanaticals, and the fruitcakes. Well, Dr. Taj Haji, really appreciate your time here from the Oxford Institute for British Islam, of course.
Oh, you make me laugh, Tom, on a very serious matter. Yes, very good to speak to you, Taj. But still to come, a Cambridge college. Now, this has made me angry. It's embroiled in a row over plans to scrap an Anglican choir that they've had for presumably decades, if not centuries, to make way for more diverse musical genres. What's all this about? You're watching Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
I've got an idea. I think that all 30-year-olds should be given £10,000 from the banks of baby boomers. We've got a situation in this country now where millennials are the first generation in modern times expecting to be poorer than their parents. We, as 30-year-olds like me, are half as likely to own a house as people my age 30 years ago. In fact, the cost of a home in Britain compared to average incomes has as big a gap today as it did, wait for it, in the 1860s. It is a Dickensian situation.
Now, I'm sorry about the housing crisis for your generation.
You're not, though, are you?
No,
because you're profiting from it.
I'm profiting from it. Don't be ridiculous.
The house prices now, compared to that period.
If this is the case, Benjamin...
Have incomes gone up that fast?
To penalise and punish the elderly when they have worked all their lives to put into the system and say, it's your fault, whingy, whiny, we're going to be envious...
We're being punished.
No, well, by the politics, so be the change you want to see in the world.
Taxes, I am actually, and I'm about to tell you about the change I want to see in the world.
Oh, you're good, as long as it's not whining about it.
I'm going to stop whining about it, but we are being taken advantage of at the moment to profit, to help the old. Most of taxpayers' money is spent in 2 departments, the NHS, so the health department, and the Department for Work and Pensions. Those departments disproportionately serve the older population. Now, I've got no issue with that, but let's not pretend that it is not young working people that is paying for the public services for old people. So actually, we are having it hard, and I just look at the future, and we see a future of perpetually higher taxes to pay for this increasing ageing population, a shrinking labour force, and you're here saying we've got nothing to worry about.
The young stop voting for mass immigration parties. The young stop voting for parties
just
that
to point
don't
out,
build houses.
Immigrants actually pay taxes, pensioners don't.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 10 to 2, and a Cambridge college has sparked outrage for its plans to cut its church choir.
Yes, St John's College says funding will be stopped for their mixed church choir called St John's Voices in order to fund a more diverse range of music instead.
Well, the decision has met backlash as soprano undergraduates will no longer be able to sing in chapel choral services, limiting church choir spaces for female singers.
Well, joining us now to discuss this further is journalist, author and presenter Jasmine Birtles. Jasmine, it's hard not to feel sometimes that traditions are being erased in this country. And yes, this is just one choir, but it's important to a lot of people. It's an example of our heritage and tradition.
Yes, absolutely. And St John's has a particularly good choir. They've been going for nearly 400 years. They have a very good level of singing. And you know, with this, when I first heard the story, I thought, gosh, that's appalling. They're getting rid of their church choir. Actually, it's not true. The chapel choir is still going to be there. They do allow females to sing alto, but it's the little boys that are singing the soprano levels. So by getting rid of this mixed choir, they are definitely reducing the amount of choral work they do and reducing, as you say, reducing the opportunities for female sopranos to sing early church music, new church music, which I'm personally a big fan of.
Yeah, it's important to recognise just how important things like this are. I should declare an interest. I grew up in Cambridge. I did go to St John's. I've been to Christmas services at St John's, to carol services there, and it's a lovely place. And I worry when these sort of institutions are being chipped away at. They're saying that this is to replace it with more diverse music, but surely they could do that as well in other parts of the building.
Well, I agree, absolutely. I went to Cambridge University. I went to Christ's College. Our choral output was not nearly as good as John's or indeed Trinity or certainly King's, but it was, it was all right. And I agree that we have here at Oxbridge and also very much in the Church of England itself, a chipping away at not just traditions, but the finer elements of what they do, really the fundamentals of what they're doing in the name of words like diversity and inclusion. And both diversity and inclusion can be good or bad, depending on what you include and what you have in your diversity. I mean, including stuff that is bad could be diverse, but that's not necessarily a good thing. Or including harmful elements is inclusive, but it's not necessarily a good thing. And I think there is a throwing out of the baby with the bathwater here. It's always a good idea, I think, to consider what one is doing and consider potential progress, new things that you could do. But to throw out things that are very popular and have a real quality to them, a genuine quality and goodness to them, is not clever, I would think, and particularly here where it's actually harming women again. Surely
that's a very good point, Jasmine. We're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much for coming on to talk about this. Jasmine Birtles, journalist, author, and presenter. I mean, this links to what we're going to be talking about in the next hour. Kemi Badenoch's comments, the business secretary. She's had enough of diversity and inclusion.
Or at least the way in which it's implemented.
That it's backfired.
All of these diversity initiatives, particularly in corporate culture in the UK, apparently we're doing more, we're spending more, and we're applying more of this sort of stuff than many other countries.
Yes, we've got the most jobs per capita that are diversity and inclusion related than any other country, I believe. We'll get to the bottom of that, get to the bottom of what Kemi says. Do you think we've got too much diversity and inclusion? Let us know.
Not too much diversity, but too much mandated schemes
That's what
of
I mean.
that. That's
Diversity
coming up
and inclusion.
in the next hour. Stick with us.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. As we head through this evening, the rain we've seen across England and Wales today will start to ease, but further wet and windy weather returns to the northwest. And that's because we're looking out towards the west for this next weather system that's going to spread its way in. This feature, though, starts to ease away, so the rain and low cloud will start to just push its way southeastwards. But for most of us, it does leave quite a lot of cloud overnight tonight. A few pockets of clearer skies, but where we see those, we'll see some mist and fog patches developing. But you can see to the northwest the return of that wet and windy weather spilling in. But what it does mean is that for most places, temperatures won't be falling away too low, typically between 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. A wet and windy start to the day, though, for western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy bursts of rain filtering their way west to east through the morning. It will start to fringe in across northern England, perhaps North Wales as well. But for most of England and Wales, a dry and bright Thursday afternoon with some spells of sunshine, but a stronger breeze for all of us. So temperatures still getting to 14 to 16 degrees in the sunnier skies, but feeling just that little bit fresher. Fast forward to Friday morning and that weather front starts to filter its way southwards, so a grey and murky start to the day here, but brighter skies following on behind with a mixture of sunshine and showers, but it is turning cooler. Our temperatures sliding away in towards the weekend, some stronger winds at times too, and some heavy downpours. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Time is ticking on your chance to win the Great British Giveaway. There's a massive £12,345 in tax-free cash to spend however you like, along with £500 in shopping vouchers for your favourite store, a games console, a pizza oven and a portable Sonos smart speaker. And the best news? You could be our next big winner, just like Phil.
Didn't quite believe it and still can't. And if I can win it, anybody can win it.
For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats, and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 20th of March.
An investigation is launched at the hospital which recently treated Princess Catherine and King Charles. The London clinic has now confirmed that all disciplinary steps will be taken in an alleged data breach of Catherine's medical records.
Fears that vaping causes cancer. A shock study has revealed that e-cigarettes could cause the same DNA damage as smoking. They are associated, but no causal link has yet been found. This comes as the government pledges to create a smoke-free generation.
And are Britain's diversity and inclusion programmes backfiring? The Business Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, certainly thinks so. She says inclusion policies can come at the expense of white men. We'll debate this in just a moment. Well, is diversity and inclusion in the jobs, in the programmes, in the schemes, in government, is it backfiring and is it penalising white men?
Well,
what do you think, Tom? You're a white man.
I am.
You're not going to fit into any diversity and inclusion box anytime soon?
I've got a lot of friends who have just sort of entered the corporate world and they're sort of working their way up. And do you know what? When we talk at the end of a working day, and thank goodness we don't have to fill out these sorts of forms over here at GB News, but my goodness, I've got friends who have just entered the world of sort of top law firms and other big businesses, where they spend so much of their time...
Tom's got a very clever friend.
So much of their time going through these DEI initiatives, diversity, equality and inclusion. They're not doing their jobs. They spend days upon days doing these courses and forms, and this can't be good for our economy.
No, and we do apparently have the largest number of these types of roles per capita than any other country. This is a huge industry, but what is it actually producing? Is it having a positive impact on society? Speaking to people from ethnic minorities, a lot of people think it's all about tick boxing. It doesn't actually help people of lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and it can be tokenistic. So we'll get to the bottom. We'll have this debate.
Just sitting on a Zoom call being told don't be a racist, is that actually going to change anything? I mean, genuinely, these things are very well intentioned, but is there actually any empirical evidence that they change things? I'm not so sure. We'll be getting to that question after your headlines.
Do they penalise white men? Do they penalise white men, all this diversity and
GB Views at gbnews.com. You know how to get in touch, but we'll get to that after your headlines with Sophia.
Thanks, Tom. Good afternoon. It's 3 minutes past 2. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Keir Starmer says the Prime Minister has a sword of Damocles hanging over him. Speaking during PMQs, the Labour leader criticised Rishi Sunak over the cost of his Rwanda plan and the lack of flights to the East African nation. But Rishi Sunak has insisted flights will get off the ground and that the opposition doesn't have a plan to fix the issue. MPs overturned 10 amendments to the legislation made by peers when the bill was in the Commons on Monday.
The tragedy is we know the Prime Minister doesn't even believe in the Rwanda gimmick. He tried to stop funding it, but he's now so diminished that his entire focus is stopping his MPs holding the sword of Damocles above his head. How has he managed to spend £600 million of taxpayer money on a gimmick to deport 300 people?
But the Prime Minister said Labour is running out of ideas.
Not only does the Labour Party not have a plan to fix this issue, but the truth is they don't actually care about fixing this issue. When he talks about the gangs, when we gave the police new powers to crack down on the people smuggling gangs, he spent months campaigning and voting against it. If it was up to him, those criminals would still be out on our streets, Mr. Speaker. And the truth is, if he wasn't the Labour leader, he'd still want to be their lawyer.
Meanwhile, housing asylum seekers on barges, military bases and student digs will cost taxpayers more than the hotels currently being used. The National Audit Office said housing those waiting for asylum decisions in alternative accommodation, such as a Bibi Stockholm barge and former RAF sites, would cost the Home Office £1.2 billion. And nearly 400 migrants have arrived in the UK on small boats today. UK and French authorities responded after at least 8 dinghies carrying asylum seekers were reported in the Channel. This takes the number of migrants arriving on small boats this year to 3,900. In other news, Leo Varadkar has announced he's stepping down as Ireland's Prime Minister. The 45-year-old says he has resigned as a leader of the party immediately and will stay on as Taoiseach until his successor is chosen. Mr Varadkar became the first openly gay man to lead the Irish government when he came out during the 2015 marriage equality referendum. He described his time in the role as fulfilling and says it was the right time.
Well, this will come as a surprise to many people and a disappointment to some, and I hope at least you will understand my decision. I know that others will, how shall I put it, cope with the news just fine. That is the great thing about living in a democracy. There's never a right time to resign high office. However, this is as good a time as any.
And Vaughan Gething has officially been elected as the First Minister of Wales, succeeding Mark Drakeford. Gething was supported by all the Labour members, as well as Jane Dodds, the Senate's only Liberal Democrat member. Conservative members voted for their respective party leaders. Bosses at the London clinic where the Princess of Wales had abdominal surgery have said all appropriate investigatory, regulatory and disciplinary steps will be taken when looking at medical data breaches. The Mirror has reported that at least one member of staff tried to access Princess Catherine's notes while she was a patient at the private hospital in London in January. And UK inflation has fallen more than expected to the lowest level in 2 years. Official figures show UK inflation for February came in at 3.4%. That's down from 4%. It's a bigger fall than economists had forecast. Inflation is now closer to the Bank of England's 2% target and comes ahead of the latest interest rate decision on Thursday. And a fresh wave of rail and London Underground strikes is set to bring travel chaos next month. ASLEF, the train drivers' union, has called a series of walkouts from April the 5th to the 8th, coupled with a 6-day overtime ban involving 16 rail companies. They've also called tube strikes on the 8th of April and the 4th of May in the capital. ASLEF drivers have voted by 98% in favour of industrial action. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Right, it's 7 minutes past 2. Now, in the past hour or so, the Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, announced that he is to resign from office.
Well, Varadkar's resignation as leader of his party, Fine Gael, is effective from today. But he will step down as Prime Minister, or as the Irish say, Taoiseach, when a successor is selected.
Well, joining us now to discuss this is GB News political editor Christopher Hope. Christopher, why do you suspect Leo Varadkar has decided at this point in time that he will stand down?
Well, afternoon to you both. He said, hasn't he, that he's done it for personal reasons. His race is run 7 years at the top of politics in Ireland. We saw this, didn't we, in New Zealand when we saw the Prime Minister resign there. We saw it with Nicola Sturgeon. It's increasingly the case, I think, that some leaders are trying to exit politics on their own terms when they're ready to go, rather than being forced out. We have more of a habit of the latter, I think, in UK politics. It's fascinating, I think, who might replace him. I've been talking to colleagues of ours in Northern Ireland and Ireland today. Helen McAtee, the Justice Minister, and Simon Harris, the former Health Minister, look are the favourites. But of course, it all hinges on whether the other members of the three-pronged coalition that run Ireland at the moment, if they support that person. If not, Simon Coveney could come back. And what I'm told is, if Coveney comes back, it makes it more likely there'll be an early general election in Ireland, probably in October, around the same time that we go to the country too, in the UK, and also, of course, America on the 5th of November. If Helen McAtee or Simon Harris become the Taoiseach, it's likely that they'll go long, and the election in Ireland itself will be in April, or at least as late as April next year. So it's all in flux. Why now? Of course, the government lost this recent referendum on the role of mothers in the constitution. I think they were quite surprised by the fact that lots of the Irish population voted against what the elite in Dublin wanted, if you use that language. There's also concern about immigration. The population of Ireland, I think, has gone up by 1.5 million in the past 10 years. And the feeling is that is immigration being a tough enough line taken by the Dublin government. So I think it's all building up, I think, on the Taoiseach, and he decided to resign suddenly. So more uncertainty, and it could bring an early election.
No, it's interesting that, of course, that election can come any point in the next year, and currently Sinn Féin is ahead in the polls, which will be concerning for many people on our islands here, across the British Isles, not just in Ireland.
Of course, Tom, you're totally right. Now, the big concern for anyone concerned about the UK's union is if you have a Sinn Féin-run government in the Republic of Ireland, and of course with Sinn Féin First Minister, as we have at the moment in Northern Ireland, it makes it the one party running the administrations in both north and south of the island, and the feeling about the idea of uniting Ireland at some point. The idea of a border poll, of course, that lies in the hands of the Northern Ireland Secretary, Chris Heaton-Harris. He must be assured that it's worth having the border poll, that there might be a majority in Northern Ireland to vote to unite with Southern Ireland. So having the two governments run by Sinn Féin will certainly be a moment to sit up for those concerned about the union.
Well, of course, in Northern Ireland, the Deputy First Minister and First Minister are technically co-equal, despite their slightly different names. So let's, it'll be an interesting... Co-equal. But Christopher Hope, you also have some news on this battle between the House of Commons and the House of Lords over the Rwanda bill. What's going on here?
Yes, thanks, Tom. I don't want to try the patience of our viewers and listeners too much about the Rwanda plan. Of course, it started life 2 Prime Ministers ago when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister back in April 2022. Now, I have on very, very good authority from one of the most senior people in government that their ministers are expecting to see 7 of the 10 amendments back, rejected by the House, reinstated by the House of Lords in the Safety of Rwanda bill today. And those 7 probably will face the issue of ping-pong again in the week after Easter. So what's being planned at the moment, and this is the timetable they've got worked out, is in the week starting April the 15th, the Safety of Rwanda bill will finally be settled. So I'm afraid to say there's another month of uncertainty about the Rwanda plan.
Wow, kicked into the long grass.
Just another month.
Yeah, just another month.
Just another month. What's another month? What's another month? Thank you very much indeed, Christopher Hope, GB News political editor, live from Westminster.
Well, let's cross from Westminster over to another posh part of London, where the world-renowned hospital where King Charles and Princess Catherine were recently treated has confirmed that it's investigating a potential data breach.
Yes, this comes after at least one member of staff was suspected of trying to access the Princess of Wales' private medical notes this afternoon. The chief executive of the London clinic said all appropriate investigatory, regulatory and disciplinary steps will be taken when looking at alleged data breaches. So talking in general terms, but certainly not denying, I think one could say confirming, that something has gone on that should not have gone on and that they're investigating. So
yes, let's get more on this with our royal correspondent Cameron Walker, who joins us now outside the London clinic in Mayfair. And Cameron, a pretty stark, almost admission there from the clinic.
Yeah, it's certainly been a busy hour here, Tom, outside the London clinic. As you said, the chief executive appears to acknowledge these allegations surrounding the London clinic and indeed the potential breach, the alleged breach of the Princess of Wales's private medical notes. Also this hour, the Health and Care Professions Council, which kind of is head of the standards of clinics such as this, said that its standards clearly states that patient information is treated confidentially, but they did not confirm whether or not a registrant, i.e. a hospital, is being investigated or a complaint has been made by a patient or somebody else. Downing Street has also got involved this morning, saying that people should get behind the Princess of Wales. The Prime Minister's spokesperson has said in the last hour, clearly there are strict rules on patients' data that must be followed. So clearly this is very serious. This is a hospital renowned for treating royalty, politicians and indeed celebrities. It prides itself on, in its own words, providing excellence in one place. We know the Princess was in there for planned abdominal surgery in January. She spent just over 2 weeks inside the hospital. And then the Mirror broke the story about this potential breach last night. Kensington Palace says it's a matter for the hospital, but all of this is in the context of the months, really, of harassment of the Princess of Wales online and the conspiracy theories which have only been amplified by the Photoshop job on the Mother's Day photograph, which the Princess apologised for, and then, of course, the footage taken by a member of the public, published by The Sun and TMZ, of the Prince and Princess of Wales walking outside of the Windsor Farm shop. And the conspiracy theories keep on coming. But it appears, as we've been talking about, at least one member of staff at the London clinic allegedly tried to access the Princess of Wales's notes, which is potentially a criminal offence. The Health Minister, Maria Caulfield, this morning seems to suggest that police had been asked to look into it. The Metropolitan Police spokesperson said this morning that they're not aware of any referral.
Thank you very much indeed, Cameron Walker, for bringing us the latest. Good to speak to you. That's Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent. He looks good in Mayfair, doesn't he?
No, it's very fitting, very in place.
Very fitting.
Well, we've been in Westminster, we've been in Mayfair.
Something more down to earth.
Shall we pop across to Greggs? Because many Greggs stores, shops even, have been forced to close after an IT glitch is causing issues at the tills.
Oh dear, well, some outlets have been forced to put temporary closed notices on their doors, while others asked customers to place orders using the Greggs app before arriving in store. Oh, so you could still use the app. So I imagine lots of people have rushed to download that app.
Well, this comes as last week the consumer giants McDonald's, Tesco, Sainsbury's and Argos also experienced technical issues which affected card payments and online deliveries.
Well, joining us now is our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, who is currently enjoying a Greggs in Birmingham. Well, there you go, standing outside. Have you got something to eat? What's going on then?
Yeah, good afternoon to you both. So these shortages, well, these outages rather, across the country happened mid-morning this morning, when lots of customers and Greggs were reporting that they're having to close many of their stores because of a technical glitch, meaning they were unable to take card payments. We're unsure about just how many of the around 2,500 of the chains across the UK were exactly affected, but this one here in the Jewellery Quarter in Birmingham did have to close its shutters, have a note saying that they were unable to open because of their lack of being able to, of course, take those card payments. Though later on, now a few hours later, Greggs have confirmed in a statement that they say that this technical issue that was affecting tills has now, the majority of shops that are affected have now been able to reopen. This one behind me has reopened. I've done some very incisive and investigative journalism to confirm with the sausage roll at lunchtime that this shop has now been able to retake card payments. But of course, as you mentioned there, it's not just Greggs that has been experiencing these type of software and technical issues. Sainsbury's couldn't fulfill a lot of its online grocery deliveries on Saturday due to an overnight software update, which they then were able to resolve within 24 hours. Tesco had to cancel a small number of orders as well. And of course, last Friday, McDonald's, due to a global outage, which they say transpired during what they're calling a configuration change, meant that during overnight, from around 5 a.m. within the UK, a lot of their stores and chains couldn't take any orders for some periods of around 2 hours. So these technical glitches are seemingly, whether it's just a coincidence that they've all happened over the past week, or whether it is more of a broader trend, of course, as more shops move to more card-only or card-preferred methods of payment. Of course, what kind of are the reasons for these issues? Well, a lot of it could be possibly common network, or also maybe problems within the payment infrastructure. But certainly for Greggs, while apologising to customers, their stores, the majority of them who are experiencing these issues, have now been able to start reserving customers.
Well, Jack, you have been doing the Lord's work with your investigative journalism there, making sure, for the good of the nation, that you're able to buy some food in Greggs. Just quickly, what did you get?
Sausage roll, triple chocolate donut, and a bottle of water. Just to keep the calories down.
Water.
And I'm sure it was a proper sausage roll, not one of these vegan things. Quite right.
Thanks, Jack. Jack Carson there, GBNews Midlands reporter. Good stuff. Are you more of a Gales or a Greggs?
I'm more of a Greggs. I practically lived off Greggs at university. And Gales, I mean, there are more of them around London now.
They're moving all over, actually.
But no, I've always been much more of a Greggs person.
Yeah, well, I think a sandwich.
Salt of the earth.
Sandwich at Gales is probably about £7. Greggs, at least, is still reasonably affordable. But there you go.
Well, yes, absolutely. We're going to be discussing so much more. Stay with us, because Britain's diversity and inclusion programmes seem to be the most pernicious in the world. At least that's according to Kemi Badenoch, the business secretary. She thinks they backfire and work against white men in particular. More on that after these messages.
Mark Dolan Tonight. Weekends from 9 p.m.
I've personally been very torn on whether Prince Harry should have full police protection when he's in the United Kingdom. On the one hand, why should taxpayers fork out for somebody that's left the country and the institution? He is no longer a working, serving royal. But I don't think it matters. He is one of the most famous men in the world, and whether he's a royal or not, he is an ambassador for this country. And he still does good. Charitable causes, the Invictus Games, and he is still a nice and charming guy with a heart. And whilst he has left the royal family and departed these shores, he was and remains the son of King Charles. That is a biological fact. Well, let's hope so. And it wasn't his choice to be born into royalty. It wasn't his choice to be the son of the king. And for that reason, I think he should have equal police protection to his brother William when he is in this country. He couldn't be a more high-profile figure, and unfortunately, like all the royals, Harry will be a target for some very bad people. I fear that if, God forbid, anything happened to him or his family, the authorities would have blood on their hands. So, it's not often that I back Prince Harry, but on this one, he has my support. Look what happened to his poor mum, killed in a Paris tunnel in the 1990s with an allegedly drunk chauffeur. A top royal security insider recently told me that Diana would still be with us today if she had had top royal protection at that time. So let's not make the same mistake twice. Prince Harry needs full protection and the best we've got. Yes, he might be a numpty, But he's our numpty.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, well, we asked you to get in touch about diversity and inclusion programmes, particularly in the workplace, because Kemi Badenoch has some views on this. She thinks they're backfiring and that they're penalising white men.
Well, there are some studies that suggest this. I know that Harvard looked into this in around 2015, 2016, and was seeing that sometimes these sort of schemes can promote resentment rather than inclusion and not promote the sort of atmosphere that they want to create. But Peter has written in to say the problems arising from DEI, that's diversity, equality and inclusion programmes, are a direct result from when policies were first introduced a number of years ago. A company would employ someone to oversee the DEI issues, and their first instinct is to develop a role so that they need an assistant. So they look for policy areas to expand, and before you know it, there's a DEI team, from one person to an assistant to a team, who then convince the executive directors they're indispensable, similar to the strategy employed by management consultants.
And no boss wants to be, oh no, we don't need any diversity and inclusion here, because they'll get shouted at. Brian says, my friend's daughter is applying for jobs in the insurance sector in London and is having to answer questions like, did you receive free school meals? What are your pronouns? And that's before her CV has even been viewed. Companies are also asking for photos of her. And he goes on to suggest that presumably if you're white and middle class, you won't be the first to be chosen.
It's interesting. Stephen has written in to say, I was made redundant after 30 years just before Christmas. So sorry, Stephen. I am 57-year-old white male and feel that diversity and inclusion is excluding older white males. Surely vacancies should go to the right person with the right skill set and experience.
And just one more, Andy from Bedfordshire. He says diversity and inclusion absolutely penalises white men and causes a toxic environment. He says, I worked for a corporate manufacturing business and the amount of pointless courses was quite frankly a joke. Everyone was forced to participate, of all backgrounds joked about the courses, and the woke HR team presenting them. Worryingly, the number of white men in senior positions has constantly dwindled since its launch. Well, the thing is, everyone there, this is the thing, everyone there, regardless of their background, was having a joke about the presentation.
If you're in the middle of something very important at work and then you have to take a day out to sit at a Zoom lecture to be told not to say racist things, I mean, do we have that low of an opinion of people in this country?
Well, the business secretary, Kemi Badenoch, claims they're counterproductive, a waste of money, and make white men worse off. It's after a report she commissioned last year found that most equality, diversity and inclusion schemes are performative gestures and ineffective. So is it time to just scrap the lot?
Well, joining us now is social policy analyst Dr. Rakib Ehsan. And Dr. Rakib, thank you so much for making time for us today. This is a pretty interesting report from Kemi Badenoch, or at least commissioned by her. What are the main takeaways?
Well, the main takeaways for me, Tom, is that many DEI policies which are being implemented in modern Britain are deeply exclusionary. And I think we've seen instances of this, for example, with the Royal Air Force, which is found to be indulging in a form of unlawful activity through its ethnic minority recruitment. Now, I think there's definitely a debate to be had in terms of how companies and firms engage with communities in terms of trying to essentially look at forms of untapped potential. But I think for me, the real issue here is that much of this is really forced at the moment. And I think things such as the introduction of racial quotas, these sort of arbitrary targets, I think they will do more harm than good. And I think another point to make, if we're looking at increasing ethnic minority representation organizations, and that's not to say that they'll be increasing working class representation. If those people are primarily from privately educated backgrounds, middle-class families, you'd have to really question how much is being achieved in terms of reducing economic inequality in the country.
Well, that's a very good point, because you may have internships, graduate schemes, positions on boards, all for ethnic minority candidates. But actually, they end up taking ethnic minority candidates who went to private school and are from a high socioeconomic status, and you're not actually getting that much diversity in terms of socioeconomic background, are you really?
No, absolutely, Emily. And I think this report specifically mentions white work, some of the most left out communities in our modern economy. So I think that what we really need to talk about here is an obsession with protected characteristics such as race. And the issue here is that actually social class is not a protected characteristic under existing equalities legislation. So I think what we really need to look at is how do we reduce perhaps those class-based barriers in the market economy. And I think that when looking at DEI, I also think that something that's largely overlooked is in terms of maximising the potential of people living with disabilities. If you look at DI policy, there quite often disability, which is also a protected characteristic, is actually very rarely mentioned.
That's a very good point. Now, this all seemed to... Now, I know we've had diversity and inclusion policies and jobs and schemes and all that for many years now, but it did all accelerate since Black Lives Matter launched following the death of George Floyd and everything that happened there. It seemed then that every single business in the land had to announce their policy on diversity and inclusion. And it all became, in my opinion, very tokenistic and virtue signalling. Do you think that's also what Kemi Badenoch is talking about?
Oh, no, absolutely. So, for example, the sort of introduction of pronouns, encouraging people to include pronouns in their sort of email signatures, the introduction of rainbow lanyards, material supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. But for me, I don't think that's necessarily going to boost inclusive practices in the workforce at all. Because many of these measures are very piecemeal and superficial, in my view. I think what companies and firms could be doing more is ultimately looking at its own recruitment procedures. There are studies which showed that people with culturally distant names, maybe like my name, for example, they don't fare so well compared to traditional English-sounding names in recruitment processes, even controlling for work experience, educational qualification and skill set. So I'd rather see those practical measures, perhaps the expansion of name-blind applications. I think that would be a more practical form of action as opposed to many of these sort of piecemeal tokenistic measures.
That's really, really interesting. I'm reminded amongst all of this that in 2010 and 2011, the French government had this experiment where they did a CV-blind recruitment. They took people's names off recruitment because they thought that certain names would be recruited less if they came from minority backgrounds. But actually the inverse happened.
Really?
They found that fewer people with minority and ethnic names were being recruited when those names were taken off the CVs.
Dear. Well,
which was a fascinating and unexpected outcome of that particular study. But I'm afraid we have run out of time here, Dr. Rakib Ehsan. We would have loved to speak to you for much longer, but still to come here on Good Afternoon Britain. UK inflation has fallen more than expected. Will we see a cut in interest rates tomorrow? Big question. But before all of that, it's your news headlines.
It's 2:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your headlines. A record 450 migrants have arrived in the UK on small boats today, the highest number to arrive on a single day this year. UK and French authorities responded after at least 8 dinghies carrying asylum seekers were reported in the Channel. Today's total beats the previous record for this year, when 401 migrants arrived on the 4th of March. Keir Starmer says the Prime Minister has the sword of Damocles hanging over him. Speaking during PMQs, the Labour leader criticised Rishi Sunak over the cost of his Rwanda plan and the lack of flights to the East African nation. But Rishi Sunak has insisted flights will get off the ground and that the opposition doesn't have a plan to fix the issue. MPs overturned 10 amendments to the legislation made by peers when the bill was in the Commons on Monday.
The tragedy is we know the Prime Minister doesn't even believe in the Rwanda gimmick. He tried to stop funding it. But he's now so diminished that his entire focus is stopping his MPs holding the sword of Damocles above his head. How has he managed to spend £600 million of taxpayer money on a gimmick to deport 300 people?
Leo Varadkar has announced he's stepping down as Ireland's Prime Minister. The 45-year-old says he has resigned as the leader of the party immediately and will stay on as Taoiseach until his successor is chosen. Mr Varadkar became the first openly gay man to lead the Irish government when he came out during the 2015 marriage equality referendum. And bosses at the London clinic where the Princess of Wales had abdominal surgery have said all appropriate investigatory, regulatory and disciplinary steps will be taken when looking at medical data breaches. The Mirror has reported that at least one member of staff tried to access Princess Catherine's notes while she was a patient at the private hospital in London in January. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. As we head through this evening, the rain we've seen across England and Wales today will start to ease, but further wet and windy weather returns to the northwest. And that's because we're looking out towards the west for this next weather system that's going to spread its way in. This feature, though, starts to ease away, so the rain and low cloud will start to just push its way southeastwards. But for most of us, it does leave quite a lot of cloud overnight tonight. A few pockets of clearer skies, but where we see those, we'll see some mist and fog patches developing. But you can see to the northwest the return of that wet and windy weather spilling in. But what it does mean is that for most places, temperatures won't be falling away too low, typically between 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. A wet and windy start to the day, though, for western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy bursts of rain filtering their way west to east through the morning. It will start to fringe in across northern England, perhaps North Wales as well. But for most of England and Wales, a dry and bright Thursday afternoon with some spells of sunshine, but a stronger breeze for all of us. So temperatures still getting to 14 to 16 degrees in the sunnier skies, but feeling just that little bit fresher. Fast forward to Friday morning and that weather front starts to filter its way southwards, so a grey and murky start to the day here, but brighter skies following on behind with a mixture of sunshine and showers, but it is turning cooler. Our temperatures sliding away in towards the weekend, some stronger winds at times too, and some heavy downpours. Bye for now.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 37 minutes past 2. But coming up, fears that vaping causes cancer. A shock study has revealed that e-cigarettes may cause, they're correlated with, the same sort of DNA damage as smoking. It comes as the government pledges to create a smoke-free generation. We'll be speaking to a Conservative MP on this topic very shortly.
Yes, but first, some good economic news. Inflation has fallen from 4% to 3.4%. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is positive. He says inflation will hit the bank's 2% target within months.
Well, GBNews has been out and about in Birmingham, seeing how our audience feels this inflation is impacting all of us.
I don't know if I'm like everyone else. I've never earned so much money. But actually I've never spent so much money either, kind of thing. So all these, gains in a little bit of interest rate means nothing to me. Everything's a lot more expensive than what it was.
I think people are finding it really difficult in this country at the moment. I think people are struggling. People feel objectively poorer. And yeah, obviously it's great that it's come down a fraction of a percent, but what that practically means for the average man and woman is not a lot at the moment, I think.
They mean absolutely nothing. You know, as a layperson in the street, I'm buying my beans, I'm buying my whatever, and the prices just keep going that way, so I think it's a bit of a red herring.
So we have to choose very carefully what we eat and what we buy and try and do it in the most economical way now, whereas before we could just really sort of please ourselves.
A lot of food that we're cutting back on, a lot of stuff like, specially branded food, we're going to get the cheaper type one.
Well, that's what the people of Birmingham have to say. But joining us now is economist and businessman Justin Earthquart-Stewart. Justin, thank you very much for joining us on this important day. Inflation down, a good sign for the economy. Will we see interest rates also follow?
Well, they certainly should. In fact, they shouldn't have actually gone up so much in the first place. This is the big issue here, is that this inflation we're dealing with is nothing to do really with what's been happening in the British economy, because you'd put up interest rates if you've actually got, say, consumer demand being very high and you want to cool the economy. Well, the past few months, that's the last thing consumers have had. Consumers have, as you were just hearing then, they're all really suffering. This inflation we were dealing with was all to do with supply chain issues, and that, frankly, the government has no control over. So if they turn around and say, haven't we been clever, we've cut inflation? No, you haven't. You didn't do it. And so that's what you've got. So therefore, A, you shouldn't put interest rates up quite so much anyway in that speed. B, well, actually, you wanted to do something for an election coming up. How about cutting interest rates right now?
It's an interesting proposition, but Justin, surely there was an element of this that was to do with government policy. There was a lot of money printed during COVID, broad money supply growth, perhaps going on for more. I mean, there was more quantitative easing, as it was known, at the end of the period of COVID than there was during the financial crisis. It seemed like some of this did feed into the inflation we're experiencing.
Yeah, if you're basically what they were doing is producing so much extra money with the QE coming through, that was bound to be inflationary. Now, therefore, they should have been putting up interest rates beforehand. Remember, what we had was very, very exceptionally low emergency rates. And when the emergency period was effectively over, they should have put them up slowly, gently over time. And that would have actually been better for the economy, better for individuals. OK, no one likes interest rates going up, except, of course, people who are actually saving, which is actually more than borrowing. But nonetheless, they could have done that in a much brighter way over a steady period of time. And you're quite right. It does reach a stage where, actually, if you pump them so much money into the system, it will eventually become inflationary. And, of course, towards this latter stage of this period, we've had now wage rises are going ahead of inflation, which is good news. Now, if that carries on, that is inflationary, but doesn't seem to be very strong at the moment. So if I were them at the moment, I would, despite the fact we keep on thinking that apparently the Bank of England is independent, which really it's not, and so they've actually only got one tool to try and control this, and that is putting interest rates up or down. So at the moment, well, I suspect they'll probably do nothing.
So, Justin, if you put your consumer finance hat on, if someone was looking to take out a mortgage, in the next few months, or perhaps take out a big loan, would you do it now, or would you hang on a little bit?
Well, I think I would be hanging on the basis that interest rates will come down. When? Well, nobody actually knows that, but I think it's a very good chance you'll see them coming down. Some people say there's still further inflationary pressures to come through. Now, that's possible if we suddenly find the geopolitical issues, say, in Ukraine and Middle East get significantly worse. That could actually then give us another bout of inflation happening. But let's assume we're not going to be thinking on the dark side. It's most likely more to come down. So I would hang back. Also, though, hang back because the rates, particularly all the various packages from the banks for mortgages, a lot have been withdrawn this week. So unless you actually have to do something, pull it back for the time being and then wait for the next round of issuances to come out.
It does seem that the market is expecting that rates will come down in the future. But when would you say that is most likely? If not tomorrow, when? Well,
the general view seems to be probably in the autumn. Let's assume that everything stays roughly as it is at the moment. The global economy is still growing. And that's always one of the things always to underline with all these things. We talk about, actually, it's doom and gloom the entire time. Well, despite the fact we've had COVID, we've got 2 wars going on, and a bout of inflation, you would think, actually, that the global economy is about to fall off a cliff. Actually, the global economy has done quite well. In America, actually, the economy has done well. The thing I find strange in America, it's done well, but most Americans don't actually believe it. They certainly don't feel they've actually got much confidence. Mind you, it's quite difficult when you're looking at an election coming up with one person who's nearly dead and the other one who probably should be.
Well, on that note, thank you very much indeed, economist and businessman Justin Urquhart Stewart. Good stuff.
No, but it is true. It is true. The American economy has been growing by more than 2%, rates by which we could only dream. What were we, 0.2% in January? Barely growing at all. And the US is going relatively gangbusters. I mean, it's not up where perhaps it was at the early 2000s, but I think a lot of people in this country would kill for those rates of growth that the Americans still don't seem satisfied with.
Yes, 0.2% for us. Well, a new study has raised fears that vaping could cause cancer. We'll be speaking to a Conservative MP about this and the government's pledge to create a smoke-free nation. Will it work? And is it desirable even? You're watching Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, I'm sure you have seen this video that went viral this week, and if you haven't, well, I think you're going to enjoy it. This is a firefighter leaning on a fence whilst watching a trapped driving instructor's car sink in 4 feet of floodwater. Looks very comfortable there, doesn't he? Just leaning against the fence.
Just chilling, just relaxing. There were in fact 2 Essex fire and rescue crews, an ambulance and a police car parked near the sinking vehicle, but they wouldn't enter the water because they had to wait for specialist crews who were trained for the water depth.
Well, 2 people who weren't going to sit back and watch were these 2, Jack and Danielle Price, who took it upon themselves to rescue the submerged driver. And Danielle joins us now. Very good morning to you, Danielle, and you are a hero, an absolute hero. What happened in this video? Make sense of it for us.
So we were filming in the area for our YouTube channel, and we've seen the fire brigade come through. I was actually out at 5 o'clock in the morning with my husband, Jamie. We know it always happens there, as you can see, and it was clear. We've seen the fire brigade come through, we've followed them, and they're just standing around as if nothing's happened. In the clip, it says he's fine, he's on his phone, and then sort of walked away. But what they failed to realise is when my partner actually opened the door, as you can hear, he's on the phone to the emergency crew in panic, thinking he's going to sink. So we could not just sit there and watch. He's absolutely terrified.
Yeah, poor bloke. Well done you. Do you reckon this is health and safety gone mad?
It is, because although I do sympathise with them, they are so red-taped, but surely sort of common sense has to kick in as open the door.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Now, 3 things have happened today. Number 1, the government has announced that it's going to ban smoking for anyone born after the year 2009. They'll never be able to buy a cigarette. Number 2, the government is going to restrict the flavours of vapes that can be bought. And coincidentally, number 3, a shocking new study is warning that vape users might be at risk of lung cancer. That's scientists at the University College London finding that using a vape there's been an association discovered, that could change your DNA in the same way that smoking does in your cheek. This, of course, as the government introduces its new anti-smoking bill. What a coincidence.
Yes. What are you suggesting there?
Nothing at all.
Just a happy coincidence. Happy coincidence. Well, joining us now is Conservative MP Adam Afridi. Thank you very much for joining us, Adam. So there seems to be a concerted effort from government and, of course, from lots of anti-smoking groups and anti-vaping groups to put a complete stop to anyone using cigarettes and tobacco products. Do you think that's fair to say? Why not just ban the whole lot?
Well, you know what, my sentiment is fairly similar to your own. I think there are some good things about the bill. I think that, looking at the flavouring, making sure the names of them and the packaging is not too attractive to children, I think that is important. But this generational smoking ban is bizarre. I mean, these things have been tried across the world over the last century. They never work. Smoking rates and vaping rates amongst children are going up in Australia, where they were trying it. New Zealand have reversed it. In Bhutan, they reversed it after smoking rates amongst kids went up to 20%. So I'm not sure it's the right approach. And I think there are better ways of dealing with smoking in the longer term.
It's interesting, this ban, which would effectively mean someone born 1 minute to midnight on New Year's Eve 2008 would not be allowed to buy a cigarette, and yet someone born just a minute later would never, ever be allowed to buy a cigarette. I mean, it's very bizarre and impractical. But, Adam, you are one of perhaps only 70-odd MPs in Parliament that are going to vote against this, presumably. It seems that there is this coalition of both the Tories and Labour and the Lib Dems and the SNP, they're all backing this in the main.
Well, the bizarre thing is actually, although we say we're a very liberal nation and MPs say we're libertarians and we're for liberal values and for freedom of choice, actually when it comes to it, people seem to love a good ban. I'm hoping that we can still do something with this to try to prevent it, because I think that the ultimate result of this will probably be that more people die from smoking. And so despite all the virtue signalling, despite all the, we want to stop this, of course, even smokers want to stop smoking, but this isn't the approach to doing it. We are the most successful in the world of seeing smoking cessation from 40% in the 1970s down to about 12% now. It's going really well. It's going down and down and down. And then all of a sudden we come up with a new policy that's been abandoned by the rest of the world. It's bizarre. And I very much hope that some thought will be given to it before they go steamrolling ahead, because I think there's a better way to approach this.
I remember there was some polling done not too long ago when this policy surfaced, and the majority of Brits backed it. I think we are, as a nation, we like banning things that we don't do, because smoking is already in decline. So people make the decision that they don't like it, and therefore they want to ban it for others. I think we like a good ban in this country, don't we?
I think so, and I think that is the mood. And I think also one or two media outlets have taken a editorial line that says, vaping is shocking, it's going to kill us all, when actually the evidence is not there at all. And quite frankly, just ask yourself this question, would you prefer that friends of yours were vaping rather than smoking? And the answer is, of course, yes, because it's so much more safe than smoking.
They're very addictive, though, Adam. I can speak from personal experience. They are very, very addictive. And I do think it's a case of the government enforcing the police enforcing the law as it stands. Children shouldn't be getting their hands on them, because I don't think it's a good thing that so many children are addicted to nicotine. But also, I don't want them to turn to cigarettes either.
No, you're quite right. But if it's the choice between something that 5 out of 10 people are going to die if they smoke, and at the moment it looks like 0 out of 10 are going to die if they vape, it's a standard healthcare practice. You choose what's safer. So if this policy is going to skew that in some way, I think it's really, really dangerous. And like I say, the evidence is where you go this route, that actually smoking rates amongst children go up. So we have to protect our children. There's no question about it. It's already currently illegal for young people to vape. It's illegal already. So really the failure is in enforcement, and let's just get on with enforcement.
There's a really important point to make. There are so many people in this country who think that somehow vaping is as bad as smoking. And now it might be that vaping isn't 100% safe, but it's clear that it's a lot more safe than smoking is. And that should always be remembered in this conversation. Adam Afriyie, thank you so much for joining us live from Westminster on these bizarre set of announcements from the government.
Yes, I'm not really sure I do think that Rishi Sunak does, he wants this to be his legacy.
I think it's just because Rishi Sunak's got young children. He's treating the rest of the country like
Thank you,
like
Adam. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up, that's it for today.
Yes,
I believe.
It's Martin Daubney up next. And Martin, what's coming up on your programme?
Cracking show, guys. Excellent stuff. Well, we've got, of course, a huge showdown. 5 o'clock tonight, the 1922 committee will be meeting. Will the daggers be drawn for Rishi Sunak? And, of course, the Lords are revolting. Once again, on Rwanda, we will have the inside line on the magnitude of that revolt. Round and round we go. Plus, People Power Special. We speak to the organisers of the RAF Scampton and Wethersfield protests against the fact thousands of asylum seekers are being dumped on their areas with no consultation. The lunatics have taken over the asylum system. £1.2 billion cost revealed, 10 times more than initially stated. Plus, Leo Varadkar quits Ireland. Did he jump before he was pushed? Are we seeing a Brexit party-style revolution sweeping across Ireland? That's all coming on my show, 3 till 6 p.m. But first, it's time for your latest weather forecast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. As we head through this evening, the rain we've seen across England and Wales today will start to ease, but further wet and windy weather returns to the northwest. And that's because we're looking out towards the west for this next weather system that's going to spread its way in. This feature, though, starts to ease away, so the rain and low cloud will start to just push its way southeastwards. But for most of us, it does leave quite a lot of cloud overnight tonight. A few pockets of clearer skies, but where we see those, we'll see some mist and fog patches developing. But you can see to the northwest the return of that wet and windy weather spilling in. But what it does mean is that for most places, temperatures won't be falling away too low, typically between 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. A wet and windy start to the day, though, for western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy bursts of rain filtering their way west to east through the morning. It will start to fringe in across northern England, perhaps North Wales as well. But for most of England and Wales, a dry and bright Thursday afternoon with some spells of sunshine, but a stronger breeze for all of us. So temperatures still getting to 14 to 16 degrees in the sunnier skies, but feeling just that little bit fresher. Fast forward to Friday morning, and that weather front starts to filter its way southwards, so a grey and murky start to the day here, but brighter skies following on behind with a mixture of sunshine and showers, but it is turning cooler. Our temperatures sliding away in towards the weekend, some stronger winds at times too, and some heavy downpours. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's still time to win our giveaway packed with seasonal essentials. First, there's an incredible £12,345 in tax-free cash to be won. Cash to make your bank account bloom. Plus a spring shopping spree with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. And finally, a garden gadget package including a handheld games console, a portable smart speaker and a pizza oven. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 £145 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1